This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Some fun news. Crooked Media has partnered with comfortable, sustainable shoe brand Carryuma to create 2 awesome pairs of shoes that listeners of Hot Take will love. One design features an all-over I voted sticker print, and one is a sleek white pair that says "No Steps Back" on the side. You can order your pairs today in the Crooked store, and as always, a portion of the proceeds from these shoes and any item you buy in the Crooked store goes to Vote Writers, the leading organization focused on voter ID. Check out both designs and claim your pair at crooked.com/kicks.
Support for Hot Take comes from the Southern Environmental Law Center and its podcast, Broken Ground, with the latest season focusing on the story of how a Black community on the outskirts of Memphis came together to beat the odds and defeat a crude oil pipeline. Here, people hailing from all corners of the city and beyond joined together to fight the environmental injustices and threats posed by the controversial Byhalia pipeline. Listen to their story, now available wherever you get your podcasts. Hey, Hot Cakes. Welcome to Hot Take. I'm Mariana Hegler.
And I'm Amy Westervelt.
How's the weather down there in Costa Rica today, Amy? Any torrential downpours today?
It has actually been raining all day here, but like a gentle rain. So no thunder or like massive amounts of rain on the roof. So that's good. Yeah.
I gotta say, when I listened to last week's recording, I was like, oh my God, is Amy okay?
Did she have to evacuate during that? I know sometimes it gets really crazy, but I know that you're battening down the hatches for hurricane season to continue picking up, right? What's happening in New Orleans?
It's been very rainy because there's a system out in the Gulf. It's like at way South Texas into Mexico. So we're getting, some rain from that. And this rain is angry, my friend.
Oh, no.
It's like that sideways angry ass rain. Yeah. And so I learned today that in my living room, the rain can get in the window.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
It's not bad. I was just sitting next to the window and I was like, where is that coming from? So, yeah. But yeah, we are bracing ourselves for the high hurricane season. Next week is the anniversary of Katrina and Ida, and the season has been eerily quiet up until now, but that can change any minute now. I've heard that there's like some dust from the Middle East in the air that's been keeping the storms from forming, but seems like that dust has moved out the way. So it's kind of, anybody's guess what happens from here.
Wow. Yeah. It's scary when you have those big disasters just sort of waiting in the wings. Mm-hmm. Actually, our guest today is from New Orleans and was there when Katrina hit too.
He was. That's right. We're going to be talking to Evlondo Cooper, who is a senior reporter at Media Matters and someone whose work we've been following for a while now. So really excited to have him on.
Yeah, he's great. He does a really great job kind of keeping tabs on what the right-wing media is saying about climate and some of the narratives that pop up around different aspects of climate policy and things that the fossil fuel industry is getting up to. We're not going to be talking to him about the hurricanes necessarily. We're more talking about how climate has kind of become a favorite talking point in the quote-unquote culture war.
Mm-hmm. Yep, but I'm sure the hurricanes will come up because, how can it not, right?
That's right. It's in the air.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
And with that, I think it's time.
It's time to talk about climate. Okay, Evlondo Cooper, welcome to Hot Take. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be on.
Could you, before we start, just explain a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm a senior writer researcher for the climate and energy program at Media Matters, and Media Matters is a progressive nonprofit organization that comprehensively monitors, analyzes, and corrects conservative misinformation in the U.S. media. Our program works to improve media coverage about the climate crisis, energy policy, and environmental justice. We also monitor right-wing media for misinformation narratives, as well as push kind of corporate mainstream media to do a better job in their climate and environmental justice coverage.
Awesome.
Wow. I have a quick follow-up question to that. So it seems like you do a lot of watching what's going on the right wing and in Fox News. How is your soul after that?
How many hours a week do you have to spend listening to like Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan?
I don't want to have any stolen valor here. I mean, really, a lot of the researchers at Media Matters, they do an amazing job. Their diet is Fox all day,
Oh dear.
Oh, wow.
including some of the darkest domains of the internet. We keep an eye on Fox. We have people flag stuff for us. So I don't want to pretend like I'm having to ingest this all day, but when, narratives do pop up, we are monitoring very closely. And it can be dispiriting to see how they, discuss or dismiss climate change.
Yeah. I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, are y'all okay?
Yes. We have a
I
very
just worry. I worry.
No, honestly, our organization is our organization is very concerned about our well-being. They have a bunch of programs and outreach. The supervisors and managers are very considerate when people need time off, especially when kind of heinous events happen in our society. So yeah, as far I can't speak for any individual, but I do think that our organization does a good job of giving people the space to step away when they need to from some of these like horrific news cycles.
Good. That's really good to hear.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, we wanted to talk to you because there's been just a really noticeable increase in the last couple of years and especially I think this year, of right-wing media really kind of dragging climate into the so-called culture war. So yeah, I just am curious to hear, like, when did you first start to see that? And like, what did it look like when it kind of first started to appear?
My day kicks off with a refreshing Celsius energy drink, then straight to the gym. Pre-K pickup, back home to meal prep. Time for my fire station shift. One more Celsius, gotta keep the lights on. When the 3-alarm hits, I'm ready. Celsius. Live, fit, go. Grab a cold, refreshing Celsius at your local retailer or locate now at Celsius.com.
My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
Yeah, I think like most things, I joined Media Matters in October 2017, I want to say. And so like most things, it was a Trump phenomenon. We do an annual broadcast study, and we could very clearly see that, coverage would spike when Trump would say something ridiculous about climate change or dismissive. And so he drove a lot of those climate media cycles, in which a lot of that stuff was harmful because they were just repeating and amplifying without debunking or refuting most of the nonsense that he was saying. And so since then, we've kind of we've seen it become entangled, like you said, in these larger culture war issues. Most recently, the Inflation Reduction Act. There was a clear sense of, they were trying to find an angle to come at it. So it was the IRS agents, and it was the Green New Deal and EVs. And so like there's this sense of marrying these issues under the thing of climate change is fake. Inflation is fake. None of it's real. Everything that's being done is designed to keep you downtrodden and depressed and dispirited and broke. And it's becoming more explicit. We've seen we've seen the trend become much more explicit as of late, where even in Sri Lanka, in other foreign countries, we've seen right-wing media people try to tag what's happening there as the Green New Deal. They're doing the Green New Deal in Sri Lanka, and it's the same Green New Deal as the one they want in America. And it's just, all you can do is document and shake your head.
Yeah, actually, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that one. I read that article of yours, and it was just like, is there anything they won't blame on the Green New Deal? So, like, how did they thread that needle?
Not good. That's the thing. I think there are legitimate good faith concerns about ESG.
Environment, sustainability, or no, environmental, social, and governance. This is like the green finance stuff. Yes.
Yes, the green finance.
Very sexy. Okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I blanked on that one. But yeah, it's green financing. And so there are legitimate concerns about, the corporations that are pushing it. There were legitimate concerns about how some of the sustainability practices in Sri Lanka were implemented, for example. But they don't care about anything. They flatten everything. And they make it the most horrible thing. But the real issue isn't so much what's happening in Sri Lanka. I don't think Tucker Carlson or most of them give a damn about what's happening in Sri Lanka. It's to tie that to American climate policy and say, you don't want that in America. If these elitists do that in America, we're going to see the same kind of hollowed out of our agricultural sector and the same kind of rioting and general societal collapse. So, yeah, they don't really care about what's happening in these places. They don't really care about, doing sustainability in a way that adheres to principles of climate and environmental justice. They just want to say that's bad and you don't want that here for their audience.
Yeah. It totally reminds me of like when the Green New Deal was first announced, just how wild all of like the right-wing media went about it, and it's like, and it like, I feel like it's just continued to show up, like the like, they're going to take your cheeseburgers and you're going to live in permanent lockdown, like you saw it come again in COVID, right? It was like, oh, if you don't like COVID lockdowns, you're going to hate the Green New Deal.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah.
Well, my colleague, Ted McDonald, just updated a study. In the 160 days after Russia invaded Ukraine, Fox Networks mentioned the Green New Deal 564 times.
Wow.
And to me, this gets at another media trend that we've been documenting, and that's really dispiriting. The fact that we can, right-wing media, Fox is going to do what it's going to do. The problem is we watched them fill a vacuum left by other cable news and broadcast news coverage. Fox was basically allowed to define what the Green New Deal was, and now they can deploy it as a shorthand for any climate policy that they don't like. So, like, for instance, like we mentioned earlier, calling the IRA the Green New Deal is beyond absurd, but because they defined the issue and because the other networks aren't actually telling you what's, about the IRA, specific climate policies, how they're going to affect people's everyday lives, what the Green New Deal would be in comparison to that, different iterations of the Green New Deal. Fox basically is allowed to kind of fill that void of coverage and shape the narrative on a lot of climate policy.
Yeah. In our newsletter, we often track, how climate coverage has gone up and down month to month. And one of the things that you have to keep an eye on in that sort of analysis is all the coverage is not good. And so sometimes the coverage will jump on television. And I'm blanking on the name of the observatory that we follow, Amy. Do you?
Yes, MCCO, the Media and Climate Change Observatory. Yeah, at University of Colorado Boulder. Yeah, that Max Boykoff and his team do an awesome job.
Yeah, they do great work. And there will often be this section in there being like, look, some of this coverage jump is because Fox News is going ape shit over this, or the right-wing media is going ape shit over this. Exactly. And it's like, but it's kind of embarrassing to think that Fox News is having more attention paid to climate change than CNN or MSNBC, because those networks are like, oh, it's too difficult to cover.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, CNN and MSNBC are doing a better job of reporting on climate change impacts and harms, particularly, with regards to extreme weather. But they do a terrible job of contextualizing climate change and other issues, such as politics and economics.
Right.
Meanwhile, Fox rarely connects an extreme weather event to climate change or climate science, but it would definitely tell its viewers how a given policy will absolutely ruin their lives. So that's the dichotomy that we see, you know.
Well, yeah, because then there's just that huge vacuum that it's easy for Fox to fill with that stuff. I don't know if you've seen this, Evlando, too, that even before Russia officially invaded Ukraine, there was all of this coverage of how quote unquote climate policy was driving up gas prices. And you saw like the American Petroleum Institute president on all of the cable news shows saying this. And like almost none of the, at least from what I saw, almost none of the reporters that he was talking to pushed back on that and said, and like even asked him to explain what policies in particular and how exactly that was increasing gas prices. So I feel like there's like I don't know, it's twofold. It's like there's a lack of time spent on it, but then also sort of a lack of, I don't know, I guess like knowledge or like education about, you know, how disinformation works and like how to try to push back on some of the messengers of it.
Yeah, it's appeal to credentialism and it's, you know, and both sides of ism. So, you know, he's the president of API. Of course, he's going to have some insight into how this works, not seeing that he's basically a paid propagandist for the fossil fuel industry.
Exactly. Yeah, it's weird because it's like, you know, they would never have like the head of Greenpeace on, for example, without a million caveats about how, you know, they have an agenda and it's this and it's that and whatever. But like the president of API is just presented as sort of like an impartial expert on how oil and gas works, you know, not as, the industry's top paid spokesperson.
Yeah.
And that was an example, you know, I think they went to the well one too many times, but at that point, the administration came out and specifically made a case about record oil profits. And so we did see a little bit of an uptick in kind to try in holding the fossil fuel industry somewhat accountable, at least mentioning the fact that, you know, every few segments we'd see a mention of record oil profits. Of course, that dies out once the news cycle dies out. But that's an instance of where the administration messaging sometimes can be beneficial in moving the news cycle in a different direction. It just happens far too rarely.
Yeah. Who do you kind of see covering climate the most in right-wing media? Is it Tucker Carlson or is it, I don't know. Yeah. Who is it?
I would say definitely Fox. You know, OAN.
Oh, wait. You watch OAN and the others too?
Luckily, I don't have to watch every now and then. Our wonderful team.
The Media Matters researchers too.
Oh my God, we gotta send you guys a fruit basket or something.
These poor folks. Yeah.
Get y'all some grapefruit.
We got people on OAN. We got people on Sinclair. We got people on Fox.
Wow.
What was the one that just got kicked off? We had people on that one too. A lot of the people doing the work behind the scenes. I mean, we're behind InfoWars. I mean, you have people monitoring InfoWars. The Bannon's War Room.
Thank you for your service.
I'm appreciative every day because, you know, I watch some of that stuff sometimes just to dip my toe in and see what's going on. And, you know, it's like unreality over there.
Yeah.
But the most consistent kind of climate denial or fossil fuel cheerleaders are definitely Fox News. If you want to see, you know, unmitigated praise of the industry, Fox Business.
Oh, wow.
I'm starting to see much more on social media. I don't want to name specific accounts, but I am seeing, I mean, yesterday, I don't know if y'all saw this, There Is No Climate Emergency was trending based on this article written in some right-wing publication that allegedly had 1,000 scientists saying that there's no climate emergency. And that was really amplified on social media. So I think it's coming from all sides now. But I guess the most mainstream right purveyor of this stuff is still Fox.
That makes sense. Are you seeing podcasts start to do this more? Like, does Media Matters monitor audio as well? Because I know, like, I definitely have seen a fair bit from Joe Rogan, and that's someone that you've covered before in the past too. And I wonder if you're seeing any kind of trend towards like an increase in that, or if it's just sort of, it gets covered from time to time, but Ben Shapiro and Joe Rogan only dip their toe in now and then.
Yeah, I did a few pieces rebutting some stuff that Rogan had on, some people he had on. We have people monitoring, like for instance, Sean Hannity has a radio show. He says something inane about climate every day. He tries to fancy himself as being above kind of cultural war stuff, but he definitely dips his toe into kind of making that connection between climate and other issues. And what they do is they reframe it as the domain of elites, so there's always this hypocrisy around climate action. Whereas if they just, I don't know, dug a little bit beneath the surface, they'd see everyday working class people that are working on these issues at the grassroots level, doing basic things like trying to improve, I don't know, their land, air, and water quality, But the caricatures are much more useful as a cudgel, so they very rarely, dig beneath the surface. But we do have people monitoring a lot of the different podcasts, especially the biggest ones, and they flag notable climate stuff when we see it. But like you said, they only kind of dip in and out of there. It's not consistent, at least not yet. And God willing, it won't ever become, because it'll be just another front, on this fight that we're monitoring.
Yeah. Can we go back to the IRA for a quick second? Because I remember in the lead up to the IRA and before it got signed, it was kind of like this idea that if you criticize it, especially, and this message was often directed to environmental justice advocates, was that if they criticized it, then that would give the right wing ammunition to attack it and therefore undermine the bill. But what it seems like is that the right wing found the ammunition anyway, because they always find the ammunition anyway. Right. So what are the criticisms, again, that you're hearing about the IRA?
Justice advocates were justifiably, in my opinion, upset about a lot of the tenets of the bill. They were upset about how the bill was championed. And I see it from both sides. You have long-term activists who want to celebrate a victory, but then you got people who feel like the victory always comes at their expense, literally, So I did see that. And I think, and I saw some good faith, really kind of vigorous disagreement and conversations about it. And I think that's good. I don't think that the right wing is ever, well, they're very rarely concerned about the kind of good faith disagreements that activists have. In fact, they don't even use those disagreements as a cudgel, right? Because even acknowledging those disagreements, that kind of small schism, they'd have to acknowledge the reality of climate change, the reality of needing massive substantive bills and policies to address it. They'd rather pretend that it's the Green New Deal and it's going to take your hamburger away, or that, people are saying EVs are literally the solution to climate change. It's much easier for them to paint with broad strokes and caricatures than actually dig down into the real substance of the disagreements that a lot of people have with the IRA in particular. And I was surprised, because to me that's it's an easy lane, but they just rather go they rather go the other route where, this is a socialist takeover of the United States government, and Biden's a radical socialist,
right?
Because he's giving people tax credits for free EVs,
right?
Yeah, I saw that in one of your pieces of Londo, that like there was this consistent messaging that basically like average taxpayers were being asked to foot the bill for the like $75,000 electric vehicles of, elitists who care about climate change. And I was like, wow, this is just wildly untrue, but they're going with it, huh?
It's so wildly untrue, and it was a much easier lane for them to take. But they, like you said, they went with just the easily disprovable lie. The language is right there in the bill, so they don't care about them being affordable. They don't care about the concerns about mining and indigenous communities for these rare minerals that are needed. They don't care about any of that. EVs are for the rich, and the rich want to have a EV to get social credit, and they don't care like about the poor or the middle class. Like that's the narrative that they want to push because it's an easy and convenient and lazy, frankly, narrative. And so even writing these pieces all the time, where, I tell my team, like, we deserve better competition sometimes, because I would like to really grapple with some of these issues in a way. But right now we're just kind of knocking down lies. But I think the problem is there's such a volume of misinformation, deliberate, disingenuous information coming out of the right and Fox News, that even if we're batting down lies, and a lot of people do this, online and in print, a lot of shows, podcasts like yours try to, give people correct information and kind of grapple with the complexities and nuances of different things. But the volume is like a fire hose. And so we're just really trying to, bat down as much as we can without, at least shift the narrative or encourage other networks, other corporate news sites to provide some context when there is none.
Yeah. It also seems like not only is there so much misinformation, but that misinformation is so much more seductive. I would love to believe that climate change isn't real. I would love to believe that we don't need to do anything about this. I would love to believe that, like, these people are just, saying this because they want to take away my burgers. Like, that's such a better story. I feel so much, more ease. But the truth is so much harder than that. And I think that's why so many people flock to, the right wing, is because I'd love to believe that. And my problems are not my problems. It's all somebody else's fault. Yes, please. Great.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have to change anything. Nothing has to change, actually. Fantastic. Yep. I love
even
it.
It's a small sliver. Poll after poll show that even like bare majorities of Republicans want the government to take climate action, because people cannot anecdotally deny what they see in their own lives, in their own backyards, in their own communities. And also, if the right wanted to make a good faith argument that we're just questioning the science of climate, then what about environmental pollution, which they never talk about? They never talk about pipeline leaks and water pollution and lead and millions of people's homes,
air pollution,
land pollution. They never talk about actual, the real systemic harms that are being caused literally, materially, by the products that we put in our land, air, and water. The fossil fuel industry and chemical and other industries are literally poisoning communities around the country. And then you never hear that part of it, that other side of it. Well, we don't know about climate, but we know that these products kill people and make them sick and they die. They shorten their lifespan. So that's why I think it's all disingenuous bullshit, because a true populist, a true champion of the working class would talk about, what's going on in some of these communities that are really being harmed by these products.
Right. I mean, I think that's why they don't give them solutions. They give them scapegoats.
Oh, yeah, brilliant.
Because it's just so much easier to hate people than it is to hate systems. Right. And it's kind of what's really scary to me is it seems like they're priming them to want climate action, but not climate action that is climate justice, or not climate action that encompasses other people. So it's like, I think they will eventually get to the point where they really want the government to act on climate, but only for white folks, only for them, and to keep everybody else out of it because they're so distrustful of everybody else.
Right. The only quote unquote solution that you ever hear Fox News pundits propose is basically ecofascism. And, that's a solution, I guess, it's, like you said before, Mary, it's not all proposed climate solutions are the ones that we want.
Hot Take is brought to you by
Tennessee.
Science tells us that the best way to achieve and maintain consistent deep sleep is by lowering core body temperature. Temperature-controlled sleep repairs muscle after a hard day's work and improves cognitive function so you can always start your day feeling sharp and alert.
I like to feel sharp and alert. Also, I love to be cold when I'm sleeping, so this is 100% my jam. I know you're like a fan of sweating, Mary.
Yeah, it's a normal human function. I don't know when people got freaked out by sweat.
I don't mind sweating, but I don't like sweating at night. It makes it hard for me to sleep. I love for my room to be cold, my bed to be cold. So I love the Chili Sleep system. They make the Uller and Cube sleep systems, which are hydro-powered, temperature-controlled mattress toppers that fit over your existing mattress to provide your ideal sleep temperature. and they're great.
Yeah, I gave one to my mom, and she absolutely loves it because she's pretty much a polar bear. These luxury mattress pads keep your bed at the perfect temperature for deep sleep, whether you sleep hot or cold. These sleep systems are designed to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and give you the confidence and energy to power through your day. For an extra layer of comfort, they also make the Chili blanket, the only weighted blanket that can also be paired with a control unit for the ultimate sweat-free sleep. So head over to chilisleep.com/HT to learn more and save 30% off the purchase of any new Cube or Uller sleep system. This offer is available exclusively for Hot Take listeners and only for a limited time. That's Chili, CHILI, sleep.com/HT to take advantage of our exclusive discount and wake up refreshed every day. Hot Take is brought to you by Athletic Greens. This is a product that I use almost every day. It is a nutritional supplement. It's this green powder that I usually just throw into water and drink. I actually think it kind of tastes good.
I'm a giant baby, so I have to make a smoothie with it.
What's in your smoothie, Amy?
Pineapple and passion fruit. Yes. Yeah, I go tropical.
Okay.
Baby. It's good.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah, those are good choices. I just knew you were going to be a banana girl.
No, I don't like bananas. I'm not a big banana fan, I have to say. I don't know why. Wow. It sounds sexual, but it's not.
That's bananas. But I love AG1 not only because of, all the nutritional stuff, but it's very good for your gut and it has vegan collagen in it. And I'm always looking for that stuff because I'm getting old. With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to start your day. Tons of people take some kind of multivitamin, and it's important to choose one with high-quality ingredients that your body will actually absorb. AG1 is lifestyle-friendly, whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free, and it supports better sleep quality and recovery. And, sleep is important. At less than $3 a day, investing in your health is cheaper than your cold brew habit. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/hottake. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/hottake to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance.
Evlondo, I'm curious to hear you talk about what you've seen on that front. We've definitely talked before on this show about Tucker Carlson's obsession with the Great Replacement theory and ecofascism in general, but I'm curious to hear what you've seen.
Yeah, we've monitored an increase in that. He talks about Great Replacement, and we see kind of people nibbling around the explicit idea of ecofascism. But what they're proposing is definitely laying the groundwork for this idea of, some variation of climate change is real. We have people from the global south trying to invade our country because they literally can't farm or eat. They don't have any food to eat anymore. And then the ramifications for internal migration. I grew up in New Orleans. I was born there. I moved back there. And I was there when Katrina happened. And the discourse around people displaced because of a climate-driven disaster, internally displaced, and what people were saying about, calling us refugees and, stuff like that. Think about that on a mass scale. Think about large parts of the Southwest can't live where they are anymore because of drought conditions, having to mix in. I think they're laying the groundwork for a very dangerous ideology where it would be easier to use the solutions we have in place to tackle the issue now instead of whipping people up into a frenzy when and if the inevitable happens. It worries us a lot, and we try to keep our eye on it, and we try to rebut it when we can. And I think you're just going to see as the climate disaster worsens, you're going to start seeing much more explicit calls for eco-fascism in the future.
Yep. Yeah. Did you notice any of that, when Tucker was covering things like the Buffalo shooter or what was the other one, the El Paso shooting and those sorts of events?
No, I didn't notice. That's not to say that there wasn't any, kind of tangential things that were said. We noticed his eco-fascism comes in a form of being a conservationist, he professes to love nature and wants to maintain nature. But it's also a form of NIMBYism that can easily trip into eco-fascism. So
Oh, that's so interesting because there's like a group that's like they call themselves, I think it's like Progressives for Immigration Reform. Have you heard about these guys? That like that's their whole thing is this like kind of old school, very Nazi tinged like we love nature and we want to protect it, and like immigration is a threat to it. You know? Sorry,
no,
I interrupted you, but yeah, go on. It's just grossly
no, that's
interesting.
exactly
Yeah.
it. And I think you're going to see these things coalesce. I mean, Tucker has explicitly, talked about great replacement. Yeah, and his conservation, quote unquote. And so I think, like I said, I haven't seen anything explicit. Doesn't mean that was something that I missed or we missed. But I'm thinking you're going to just see much more explicit marrying of these ideologies as the climate worsens and as people are driven out from their homes to seek refuge in places like America. It's inevitable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you for bringing up Katrina, because I think when I first got involved in climate, it was because of Katrina. And like I remember hearing people say, "Oh, well, climate change is a thing that unites us all. It's a threat to all of us. It's the great equalizer," and yada yada. And it was like, am I the only one in this room who remembers Katrina? Because that shit looked real unequal.
Yeah.
And like I don't see that necessarily getting better. And also just want to acknowledge that the anniversary is coming up next week, and it's a pretty somber time here in your hometown.
It is. It is 17 years, I think. I mean, it's hard to.
This year is 17, and 1 year after Ida.
Wow.
And see, that's the thing. Getting like ecofascism manifests in different ways. Even how areas that were destroyed by disaster get rebuilt. Because at the time people thought there's going to be, at least I did, this kind of climate policy utopia where we're going to be able to hop on a trolley or some kind of a mass transit system to get from Metairie to New Orleans without having to get on I-10 and be stuck in traffic for hours.
Sounds beautiful. Sounds beautiful.
Utopia.
Really,
yeah. But in fact, it was like disaster capitalism almost immediately.
And when you start thinking about how, what that looks like internally, that's my other fear of ecofascism, that, who's going to get resources, who's going to be allowed to rebuild, who's going to be excluded, who's going to become sacrificed. It just manifests its ways and manifests in myriad ways that are very concerning.
You see it in like the climate gentrification stuff in Miami too, where like all of a sudden all of the, the higher ground areas that for years were basically red zoned for poor people and immigrant communities are now becoming desirable, and lower income people who are mostly Black and brown are being pushed like literally into the sea. Yeah. I mean, it's gross. It's really gross. Yeah. And I mean, when we talk about like I've talked to a few people recently about how to plan to move people. Managed retreat is the term. I find it like terrifyingly bureaucratic, that term. It sounds so
I hate that.
innocuous, but it's like we're talking about moving entire communities, and like who we have no map for like who's going to be making those decisions. And like I don't have a lot of optimism for them being very, very filled with thinking about equality or talking to the actual communities themselves.
Yeah. Quick plug for the new HBO documentary, Katrina Babies, that comes out this week about a lot of that.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah. Especially about the kids. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Anyway, yeah, I do. I feel like the internal migration stuff doesn't get talked about nearly enough, and it's very, very interesting and kind of scary the way it's being approached so far. Have you seen any good examples of media, sort of effectively counteracting these right-wing narratives? Like what are you seeing there, and then like what do you think would help?
I think, and we, it's a hard landscape for us to cover, but we do try to dip in when we can. I think we've seen a lot of bad local coverage, through Sinclair, but I think we've seen a lot of good local coverage, and a lot of it comes through meteorologists, who, and it's a small step, but most people will never see climate science connected to something that's happening in their community, especially not on national TV or cable news TV. Having, local trusted reporters, report about extreme weather impacts, what the science says that'll look like in 10, 15, 20 years, different environmental justice issues when they arise. That gives me some hope because, part of the reason why I think it's important to keep an eye on the media and keep nudging the media is that I don't think it's too late to galvanize the public towards meaningful climate action, to demanding meaningful climate action. I think the more informed people are, the more they're informed about not just the consequences, but the potential solutions, knowing that there are solutions that exist that could have a meaningful impact, positive impact on their lives. And I think you see a lot of that in local coverage. I think some of the national meteorologists have been doing a good job of just making the connection between climate change and extreme weather. And now we're pushing for them to just do one more little acknowledgement and to say, science says that the continuous burning of fossil fuels is what is driving these, harmful climate impacts. And just letting, and so we can start having some accountability for the fossil fuel industry. Because this stuff is not happening in a vacuum. I think that's my biggest hope, is that we can move from climate science to climate accountability and saying, this is why this is happening. This is the industry and the people that are driving this crisis. Here's why we need to transition away from that yesterday. And I think, you're seeing some of that at the local level. You see some of it at the national level on some cable news outlets. You have people that try to do a decent job every now and then, but I don't think it's consistent enough to really break through.
It's interesting though too, because I think that the local level is where I think it's easier to reach people across a broad political spectrum. Like especially at the national level, especially in the cable news realm, I just feel like the people who are watching cable news are self-selecting into ideologically tinged news channel. Like, no one who is an avid Fox News watcher is just going to, switch over to CNN and see what they're saying about climate. It's just not realistic. But they might watch their local news at night. And like, that's where I think you might be able to kind of to reach some folks who are otherwise only consuming a steady diet of, Fox News or maybe OAN.
Yeah.
We don't have anymore like a national news broadcast that everybody watches, right? Everybody just sort of chooses their own media diet that
I think
affirms what they already believe.
Yeah, I think C-SPAN might be the closest to it, or NPR.
Yeah, that's right.
But even there,
no, NPR's terrible.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
I don't own a radio.
This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Whether you're struggling with grief, relationships, or stress, or all of the above because we're living in 2022, or maybe you're having trouble sleeping or meeting goals, online therapy might be for you. I have been living in areas for the past 15 years where finding an in-person therapist is quite difficult. So things like BetterHelp is like a total lifeline. You can find any type of specialty on there. They let you change therapists really easily, which is nice. And frankly, a lot less awkward than someone that you've met in person and decided you don't like. Yeah, there are a lot of benefits. A lot of benefits to virtual therapy. Also, it can kind of happen like whenever you have time. You can schedule video calls and chats, but you can also like write to your therapist about shit that's going on in the middle of the night if you want, and then they get back to you the next day. I feel like it was really it's very well suited to kind of the way a lot of us are living these days.
Yeah, like a lot of us are living with insomnia.
Exactly. Yes. BetterHelp is secure online therapy. They offer all kinds of options: video, phone, live chat, emails. They can assess your needs and match you with an accredited therapist in under 48 hours. Log into your account. Yeah. You can log into your account anytime to send messages and get responses, schedule weekly sessions, and not only do they make it easy and kind of stress-free to change therapists, it's also free. Like you don't have to pay to, sign up with a different therapist if you want.
Oh, that's helpful.
Which is nice. Yeah. You can visit betterhelp.com/hottake to join the over 2 million people who have taken charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional. In fact, so many people have been using BetterHelp that they are currently recruiting additional therapists in all 50 states. Hot Take listeners get 10% off their first month of online therapy at betterhelp.com/hottake. That is betterhelp.com/hottake. Support for Hot Take comes from the Southern Environmental Law Center and its podcast, Broken Ground. In the latest season, listeners journey to Boxtown, Tennessee, a Black neighborhood on the edge of Memphis, tucked into a bend of the Mississippi River. This community has a rich history, and its residents cherish their deep ties to the land. Here, people young and old, hailing from all corners of the city and beyond, came together to fight the environmental injustices and threats to their quality of life posed by a controversial crude oil pipeline. In the course of telling this story, Broken Ground uncovers the stories of the community who pushed back against the project through grassroots organizing, legal advocacy, and unwavering determination. Find out how a crude oil pipeline went from imminent to canceled from the people on the front lines. Listen to their story in the latest season, now available wherever you get your podcasts, or stream it directly at brokengroundpodcast.org.
But I want to go back real quick to, you mentioned Sinclair, and I'm not sure all of our listeners will know what that is or what it's done to local media. So could you take a quick second to break that down?
Yeah, so Sinclair they're a conservative media conglomerate that has, kind of made their way into a lot of different local newscasts. They've bought up stations all around the country. And what we found is that, not only are they like very extremely conservative, but there were times where they would push out a single message to all the local broadcasters had to repeat. A couple of our videos a few years ago, that was showing like all these different newscasters literally reading the same script about some kind of contentious issue. So that's who Sinclair is. They were huge Trump backers. They're very tied to the fossil fuel industry. They are very supportive of the industry. They routinely deny climate, but it's interesting that that's kind of the corporate philosophy, and you see it manifest in different ways at the local level. And we have people here who've done a lot of work trying to highlight the work that Sinclair does, highlight its corporate ties, highlight its kind of almost dictatorial control over what their local news stations can report on and how they report on it. So that's who Sinclair is. And so you can check, if people want to know, who's providing them their news, if it's not ABC, NBC, Fox, CBS, it could be Sinclair. And, I would encourage them to find a more reputable channel to get their news from.
Yeah. I learned about them through the John Oliver show last week tonight, which has been doing really stellar coverage on climate too. So shout out to them.
Yes. Yes, totally. I feel like it's important to note too that, Sinclair buying up local news stations happened right alongside a whole bunch of local newspapers going out of business. And we just had another round of that happening thanks to Gannett. So, like the loss of local news coverage is a really big problem here too, because I think a lot of people do tend to trust their local news sources maybe more than national. I feel like you get less of the like, oh, the media are just all liars at the local
Yeah.
level than you do at the national level. So
There's nothing like a investigative report on some industry that's polluting or some, like the investigative capacity of the media, the investigative journalism piece to me is, I think, the biggest blow to accountability. And it's basically eroded at the local level at this point. I can think of very few local papers that are doing kind of giant investigative journalism pieces anymore.
Yeah. I mean, that's why, I think, organizations like Floodlight and ProPublica that are trying to funnel money into local investigative work are really important.
Yeah.
But there's just, I mean, even at the national level, there's such a hollowing out of resources for investigative work. And as someone who does investigative journalism, I can say it takes a lot of time and that requires resources, and no one has those resources right now. There's maybe, I feel like the other thing that we're seeing too as a result of that is that you basically get one big investigative piece, every quarter maybe from one of the 4 white guys at big national media outlets, you know what I mean, who are allowed to do those pieces anymore. It's a little bit dispiriting, just how little of it there is and how little funding there is for it. And certainly not big teams, doing stuff. I think, Chicago, Minneapolis, there's a few cities still that have pretty robust local papers, but man, they're few and far
outlets like
between.
yours, I mean, Grist put out a huge investigative piece a few days ago.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah.
It's just, there was a heyday of that, I feel like maybe I just think for the accountability piece, I think that's what's missing from that, because, without accountability, nothing will really change. The same people keep running the same scams and getting away with it and polluting,
Yeah. Can we talk about that a little bit too, actually? Because I feel like I know I get this very annoying to me accusation a lot of of just trying to always point blame at oil companies and
but they're always doing shit.
And, I know. I'm well, the thing is, they've never actually been held accountable yet.
Yeah.
So I don't feel like there's too much of that, And I wonder if what you see in that vein of Londo, if I don't know, if you see a kind of an aversion to accountability as somehow seeking to place blame or, punish certain companies more than others or something.
I think this is just me, my personal thought. I think I think it speaks to the new media landscape, at least cable and broadcast, that it is kind of an elite domain, and I think it's gauche to go after, just to bash and quote unquote bash an industry or to call them out.
Right.
There's also probably, material financial concerns about, because a lot of these companies advertise on these channels. A lot of the folks, you see Chevron pushing greenwashing on all the cable networks, honestly. And so,
and constantly in Politico.
Sponsored by it, literally.
Yes.
And so, I don't want to say that that's a causation, but there's definitely a correlation, I think, between the willingness for at least these corporate networks to hold these industries accountable. And we're pushing for that accountability because, I mean, frankly, honestly, if there was this much evidence about any other industry, I think that industry would have been nationalized and driven out of business by now. But meanwhile, they're still allowed to operate with basically impunity. Even in a quote unquote historic climate bill, there are huge carve outs to keep that industry, funded for years. Yes, profitable for years.
Yeah.
And even beyond, like I said, again, even beyond just driving CO2 into the atmosphere that's causing all these aberrant and dangerous extreme weather impacts, they literally pollute the land, air, and water of some of the most vulnerable communities in the country without any oversight or accountability. So we're pushing hard for the media to start holding the fossil fuel industry accountable. And I love what y'all do on social media and podcast and newsletter.
Cyberbullying?
You're punching up, definitely. So I don't think you can. I don't think I would want to see that kind of. I would want to see this tenfold, hundredfold. And everywhere it should always be. These are the industries causing the harm. So I love that.
It's weird. I feel like there's like there's a thing that happens, and I think we've talked about this on here before too, where if you do push for accountability, it's sort of this immediate like, oh, you're an activist or you're an advocacy journalist and therefore less credible. I don't know. I've heard this from journalists who are worried about being painted with that brush. And I know like I've had people say that too, or about me as like a way to try to discredit some of the reporting that I've done. And it's very it's very effective. It's effective and it's stupid, I think,
I mean, if like we talked about the API president earlier. I mean, is he an advocate? Right.
Definitely
right.
Biased.
I think he's a propagandist, I mean, so
he is. Yes.
Like speaking the truth about something, about an issue, about a company, about an industry, to me isn't activism. It's actually journalism. I don't know. Like, I think you're a journalist and you're reporting what you see in the world. So that's a weird charge to me. And
I think it's weird too, because like if you, I don't know, like if you have that information and you don't sort of point to the logical conclusion that information leads to, then that's also a bias. It's like, well, sugarcoating it or making it seem like, oh, sure, these companies have a role, but so do lots of other companies. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like that's a bias. It's frustrating, but it's so baked in to the media landscape and really like sort of a lot of the quote unquote rules of media, which is annoying too, because it's, I'm going to get on my soapbox here for just 10 seconds and say that it was the fossil fuel industry like actually created a lot of those rules.
Yes.
It was oil companies that really like pushed for the sort of quote unquote, objectivity that we see today, and that created false equivalence. And it's irritating to see journalists still not sort of breaking free of that and doing their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Also being aware of the fact that Exxon's own scientists in the 70s and 80s were just as accurate as the IPCC scientists and researchers have been. I mean, it's incredible that the gap between what they knew and what they said, and they should never, ever be credulous about anything this industry says, ever.
Yep. Yeah. I think it's really important to consider that they knew all of that stuff when the BP oil spill happened, when they went to the Iraq War, when the first Iraq War, even like they knew all of this stuff. So this whole idea of like, oh, we got to give the industry time and they didn't know and all it's all bullshit. They knew better than anybody else.
Shruggins and subsidies.
Yeah. My favorite example of this, beyond, of course, like the memos and all of the stuff that the scientists were doing, is that these companies were taking out patents in the 70s and 80s for all of the infrastructure that they would need to continue drilling for and transporting oil in a warming world. So, offshore platforms engineered for sea level rise, oil tankers like designed to navigate a melting Arctic, 70s and 80s patents. It takes a long fucking time to develop technology and then patent it. And they were getting those patents in the 70s and 80s. So the idea that they need more time, like they had all the time in the world to prepare their own industry for what's happening now, but they didn't afford the rest of us that time. And I don't understand why, you would continue to have, the API president who, helped coordinate a lot of that stuff too, by the way, on as a credible source on anything. Yeah. Anyway.
Do they think that they will escape the consequences of their actions, like in terms of the long-term climate impacts? They're never going to be brought before a court. But will they actually escape?
I mean, I think they do actually, though. I think like a lot of these executives, and also I think a lot of the sort of like billionaire libertarian folks, like the Peter Thiels of the world, I think see a future where they're basically aristocrats and like, they're able to afford
bunkers.
Long-termism. Exactly. It's that whole thing of like, well, we'll like me and mine will be fine. I think they do believe that. Yeah. It's gross.
Yeah.
Really
if there's some politician in their pocket, you definitely don't have enough money to get a bunker. So what are you doing?
Exactly. Or a rocket ship. Yeah.
These are all terrible ideas and they won't work. But, I think they're dumb enough to believe them. So, hey, you guys are right on target. Well, I feel like there's so much more we could talk about. So, Evlando, we hope to have you back to talk to us again in the future. But I can't resist the urge to ask a Louisiana native, why is Louisiana the state that's nearest to every other state in the United States?
Oh, what do you mean? Uh-oh. I think I might.
Think about it. Just a thinker.
Oh, dear. Why is Louisiana nearest to every other? Tell me. I don't know. I'm stumped.
Because it's the Bayou State.
Oh, no. It was right there.
Classic Mary Hagler pun.
It was right there.
I meant to tell you can ask Amy for help, but
so good.
Tag my life.
So good. Nice.
Yep. You can practice for next time.
Man.
You can practice for next time.
I'll be ready.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Evlando. This was great. We're super excited, and we will definitely have you back on.
Thank you. This was fun. I really enjoyed talking with y'all.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you.
Hey, hotcakes. It's Mary. We are pretty clear on this show that you don't need to understand all the science to care about or even to understand climate change. But at the same time, we understand that you might have a few questions about the climate science. You might have a few curiosities. So we are planning a special mailbag episode where we will go through your scientific questions and more. And you can send those questions to hottake@crooked.com. That's hottake@crooked.com. We're planning to have this episode sometime in September, and we will be inviting on a fantastic climate scientist to help us talk through these things. So again, send your questions to hottake@crookedmedia.com. Hot Take is a Crooked Media production.
It's produced by Ray Pang and mixed and edited by Jules Bradley. Our music is by Vasilis Fotopoulos. Thamali Kodakara is our consulting producer, and our executive producers are Mary Anais Hegler, Michael Martinez, and me, Amy Westervelt.
Special thanks to Sandy Gerard, Ari Schwartz, Kyle Seglin, and Charlotte Landis for production support, and to Amelia Montooth for digital support.
You can follow the show on Twitter @RealHotTake, sign up for our newsletter at hottakepod.com, and subscribe to Crooked Media's video channel at youtube.com/crookedmedia.